Hi everyone, I want to welcome you to the virtual pre-service teacher network for mathematics, and this is the February webinar. My name is April Forts and I'm the state supervisor for mathematics at the Iowa Department of Education, and tonight's talk is going to be around the standards for mathematical practices that are connected to problem solving. Some things to note: that when we talk about assessment target information, our focus is always on instruction. And we have classroom resources for the different grade levels that contain all this information under content available on the Iowa Core website. And as a disclaimer, remember we are a local control state, so districts choose what they use and it's totally up to them. This is just providing some guidance, and if you're looking for this, then this might help you to do the work. So tonight we're going to talk about how do we take our standards and look at the standards for mathematical practices 1, 5, 7, and 8 around problem solving. We're also going to talk about the 8 effective teaching practices from principles to action and how that's a nice connection. And I always tell people that the content is what we want the students to know. The standards for mathematical practices are like what we want the students to be able to do. And the 8 effective teaching practices, those are what teacher actions that can help bring the content and the standards for mathematical practices to fruition in the classroom. So a tool that we have under development that we're going to talk about tonight is this Iowa Core Standards and Instruction to Assessment Target Alignment Guide. And so if we open that up, you'll notice that part 1 is about the content standards, which we covered in our December webinar. If you've not watched the December webinar, you might want to go back and watch that. So tonight we're going to jump right into part 2, which is around the mathematical practices for problem solving. And this is a little table of contents, so I can navigate down to that part of the document. So under problem solving, we say that students can solve a range of complex, well-posed problems in pure and applied mathematics, making productive use of knowledge and problem-solving strategies. When we say well-posed, we mean everything that the student needs to know to solve the problem is listed. Because when we have kiddos in our classrooms trying to solve problems, we don't want them getting stuck on other information. So the 4 standards for mathematical practices that lend themselves to problem solving is: number 1, make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. 2, use appropriate tools strategically. Sorry, that would be number 5, but it's the second one on our list. Number 7 is look for and make use of structures. And number 8 is look for and express regularity and repeating reasoning. Now, we're going to go and look at this information on the Iowa Core site. But what this document here does is it gives you a walkthrough of screenshots and information to help you kind of understand what I'm going to be sharing with you tonight. Okay, so we're going to talk about assessment targets for problem solving and what content standards or content clusters lend themselves to problem solving more readily. So we would go to the Iowa Core website, and then under educator resources, we're going to go to mathematics. And then underneath there, we're going to go to summative. And it's not about the assessment, it's about the instruction, but we should be assessing what we're instructing on. So this is where we have the information for the grade level bands. And so I'm just going to start with grade 3. Again, this is a table of contents up here. This would take you directly to the content standards, which you'll see here. So we have our content standards, or our content clusters, the clusters of our standards aligned with our assessment targets. And so you can see the cluster headings and the how we annotate those, and then you can see which standards also go with those. But we're going to talk about problem solving. So when we go down here to problem solving, you'll see again that what do we mean by problem solving? So we state that. And then within the problem solving, we have 4 targets. So we want students to be able to apply mathematics to solve well-posed problems in pure mathematics and those arising in everyday life, society, and the workplace. Target B, select and use appropriate tools strategically. Target C, interpret results in the context of a situation. Target D, identify important qualities in a particular situation and map their relationships. And you'll notice that the DOK levels are already here for us. So we don't have to sit and think about, well, what will that look like? And those sorts of things. And you'll also notice that I think it's pretty easy to see how the standards for mathematical practices are embedded in these targets. So if we're having students do problem solving and we're having them do these targets here, we're also having them do the standards for mathematical practices. So it's a nice fit. I often get asked the question, well, which standards for mathematical practices go with which content standards? And I would ask you to flip that around. I would say, as you're thinking about problem solving, knowing that we're talking about 1, 5, 7, and 8, what clusters of standards naturally lend themselves? And so we have some listed here, and the asterisk denotes supporting clusters. And when we go up on top and look at a couple, we'll talk about that. So here we have 30AA, 30AD, and 3NBTA. So if we scroll up here to our assessment targets, and then we see under 30AA, I have these 4 standards, and represent and solve problems involving multiplication and division. That makes sense that that would go with problem solving, right? So we would want to use problem solving and those targets below that are aligned to the standards for mathematical practices to have kids solve problems that involve multiplication and division. Also understand properties of multiplication and the relationship between multiplication and division. Again, so we want kiddos to solve problems around this. This one down here, 3NBTA, we would want kids to use place values, understanding and properties of operations to perform multi-digit arithmetic. Now, you'll notice that our first 2, which I actually said B was the wrong one because it was D, right? Because we're solving problems and involving the 4 operations. It was D, not B. I misspoke that and read the wrong one. But it was D, solve problems. It says right there, solve problems, solve problems. But the M is your priority clusters or your major clusters, and the S's are your supporting clusters. So any of these standards that are in a priority or a major cluster would also be major or priority standards, and likewise with the supporting. So then we can go back down here to our assessment targets, and we can see that we have some achievement level descriptors, and these are things that I would use to measure a student's work. We don't want to say a student's proficient or a student's non-proficient or a student's a level 3 and you're a level 1, and we don't want to do that. Students get enough labels already in education. So we really want to look for what is the evidence in students' work that lends itself to being able to determine whether their work is meeting that achievement level of being proficient for problem solving. Where's my evidence in their student work? Now, how this ties nicely to our principles to action is if we look at the 8 effective teaching practices, obviously we want to establish mathematical goals to focus learning. Implement tasks that promote reasoning and problem solving. Boom, right there. We want rich tasks that promote problem solving. We want students to use, we want teachers to use and connect mathematical representations, right? A lot of different ones. Facilitate meaningful discourse. Pose purposeful questions. Build procedural fluency from conceptual understanding. Support productive struggle in learning mathematics. And elicit and use evidence of students' thinking. So there's where that evidence. So how am I going to determine evidence of a student's problem solving? Well, I'm going to ask purposeful questions. I might listen to their mathematical discourse. I might look at their conceptual understanding. And this can be done even in 5th grade. Prior to becoming an educator, I had a at-home daycare. And every day we would play school. We would have preschool and we would have color week. And I actually bought a curriculum. And it was amazing to me. 2, 3, 4-year-olds, they can argue and they can construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others when they're encouraged to do so. So all of this is in alignment, and these are really for the teacher. These are the teacher practices, and how a practice is different than a strategy is, as an everyday example, every night my family practices having dinner. But the strategies that we use to have dinner or what to have for dinner vary. So we might order out, we might order in, we might have leftovers, I might cook something, it could be toast and cold cereal night, whatever. Those are strategies, but the practice is consistent. So we want to consistently pose purposeful questions and have students problem solving. Also, if you want to have a deeper look, you can go to the standard-based grading rubric where we have information about problem solving right in there, and they have threshold descriptors. So you can see if a student's work is, if you're like, I'm not sure if their work's a 3 or a 2, it gives you skills to look at to see, just as they're coming into 2 or just as they're coming into 3, what skills will they be exhibiting? Also, I would encourage you all to go and take the practice test that's available. You can pick your grade level. As a reminder to you all, we are starting the G+ community for pre-service teachers. So give a shout out for that. Would love to have you join that as well. We have an ICTM save the date, and we're going to be talking more about principles to action there. Growth mindset is going to be a great time. More about the Iowa Core. And lastly, we have a statewide June professional development. And if you're in the area, we would love to have you attend. So go ahead and register, and you can use this document to register. And so you can see somebody's in here looking at the document. So here are the registration links. And then off of the website here, you can get to the math page from these links over here, the Iowa Core Standards and Instruction. And also you can follow me on Twitter. There's a mathematics blog that just starting up, just kind of getting it going. And what we're doing is we're taking the items on the Iowa Core website and we're talking about each one of those, and we're doing an individual webcast. So please, if you need anything or have questions, please contact me. I hope you'll go back and you'll watch the previous webinars to bring up your skills there, and that you'll continue to watch and attend the live webinars. Thanks, everyone.